Hi everyone, my name is Samyak Dhawan. I'm a 27-year-old doctor turned MBA here to talk about change and how to be comfortable with it. I don't know if you guys know this, but I graduated from this school 10 years ago. And I'm here to share whatever little experience I've had in the last 10 years with you. And hopefully by the end of my talk, I'd have inspired at least one of you to do something unconventional, irrational with your life. I'd like to start by sharing a small story about me. I grew up in a lower middle class family where my mother used to earn 3 to 4,000 rupees per month working shifts in a nursing home. My father used to charge 10 rupees per consultation from his patients, and both my parents, Ayurvedic doctors, would bring in 6 to 8,000 rupees, around $100 per month. To the extent that I've seen my mother put pennies in a piggy bank so we could afford milk and groceries every month, and my parents could never afford to raise another child. Because even though my parents tried very hard not to let me feel a lack of resources, their struggle was very apparent and has shaped my relationship with hard work today. And because my parents were so busy putting food on the table, I felt their scarcity growing up. I felt their absence in my childhood growing up. And I knew in the moment, subconsciously somehow, that I want to do something that allows me enough time with my kids, but at the same time make enough money so that my kids never feel a lack of resources at their disposal. And so, retrospectively, now that I think about it, that became my first trigger to pursue an MBA after finishing my medicine. Now let's jump to 2015. I'm in my third year at medical college at KMC Manipal. Uh, Third year is the first time when students are first exposed to clinical departments such as medicine, surgery, ophthalmology, ENT, etc. Now, this is where the trouble truly begins. Every time I would walk into the hospital, I realized that I wasn't truly content with what I was doing. I wasn't truly looking forward to my day. I wasn't, planning on expanding my knowledge base. And so I spoke to other doctors, interns, postgraduates, and physicians in the hospital, and I realized that this was just my observation, that majority of the doctors weren't truly happy with what they were doing. Maybe some of them weren't happy with the workload. Maybe some of them weren't happy with the pay scale. Maybe some of them weren't happy with the level of respect that doctors were getting in the country at the time. And so it occurred to me that maybe if this is what my future could potentially look like, I probably would want to change it. And so that became my second, that realization, that feeling became my second trigger to pursue something else apart from medicine. My final trigger came in 2017 when I was interning in South India, in a rural village in South India. And I firsthand noticed the discrepancies in the healthcare services that were being provided to the urban and the poor people. And it occurred to me that maybe my true calling is something else. I knew in the moment that I wanted to remain attached to healthcare, but I didn't want the conventional one-to-one doctor-patient relationship. I wanted to help patients on a much larger scale. And so, in 2017, the idea to pursue an MBA after finishing MBBS was born after a careful analysis of all viable options to me at the moment. Now, sure, I'd made up my mind. I still had to share the decision with my parents, right? And you can imagine how that conversation must have been like. But luckily for me, after a few back and forths, my parents agreed. In fact, they were also very supportive of my crazy idea. But I realized something in that year that I'd like to share with you, which is that making a decision like that in our culture is very similar to the concept of love marriage, right? It's not enough if you've made up your mind to marry someone. You still have to convince your parents. And if by sheer luck or persistence or hard work or whatever, you've managed to convince your parents, you still have to convince your relatives, your uncles and aunties and your extended family, right? And so I had to endure a lot of things, along the lines of, he's wasting his parents' money, he's wasting 6 years of his life, he's wasting a medical seat in the country, as if that's the most important criteria. 30-35,000 की नौकरी करेगा आपका लड़का, हॉस्पिटल में जाके नर्सेस के ड्यूटी के अटेंडेंस रजिस्टर बनाएगा आपका लड़का, stuff like that. But regardless, I was rigid, I was headstrong, and finally everybody's on board my crazy adventure train. But I still have to finish internship, and I also have to apply for business school entrance exams in that same year. So what I would do is I would carry some of my prep material with me to the hospital. So any chance I'd get in between the patients, I would solve a few multiple choice questions. I still remember that one day where one of my seniors, he saw my 10th class maths NCRT. I actually had to go back and relearn integers, whole numbers, fractions, decimals once again. He picked up my book and he threw it on the ground and he said, "Whose maths textbook is this?" And I was so shocked and I was so ashamed, I couldn't even admit that it was mine. Next day, however, all of my prep material was covered in newspaper foldings. So here's my lesson number one for you, which is that when you try to do something unconventional with your life, whether it's quitting your job to start up, you're going to be raising a few eyebrows. But as long as you've managed to convince the only two people in the world who matter, who are your parents, you're not answerable to anybody else. Because think about it logically. If you can't even convince your parents to buy your vision, how do you expect your future potential customers to buy your product or service, right? So that's my lesson number one for you. Some heads are going to roll. Now, we're in 2018. I'm finally in the States. I've managed to surpass all doubts, criticism, taunts, and everything. But if you thought that making that decision to move from MBBS to MBA was difficult, living that decision, as it turns out, was much, much harder because on day one of our orientation, we were being told to become networking lions. We were being put together in teams and made to do group activities together, group projects together. We were being encouraged to speak to different people. And when I say different, I mean people from different backgrounds, different race, ethnicity, culture, professional journey, age groups, and everything. And for someone like me, who came from a completely different background, grew up pretty much single with no siblings, and hung out with a select few group of people in med school, that was a nerve-wracking experience. But I knew something in the moment, which was that I've come to America specifically for the reason to acquire the soft skills of language and communication. And so anytime my white folks would invite me out for drinks over the weekend, what I would do is, even though the introvert inside me yelled no, I would go against my instinct and I would go out because I knew that would be a great opportunity for me to practice my skills of language and communication. There's a voice inside your head that tells you that this is the easy way, but this is the right way. And that voice is known as conscience. And luckily for us, humans are that select few group of species in this observable universe who possess the evolutionary gift of conscience. And so I urge you guys sitting here and watching on YouTube to do something that makes you uncomfortable on a fairly regular basis. All right? Today you could put me in a room with 100 different people and I can hold conversations with them ranging from medicine, finance, business, tech, software, and it didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen by chance. I had to acquire those skills on a fairly constant basis. I had to practice those skills. All right. That's my lesson number 2 for you. Don't be comfortably numb. Cool. Now in India, my degree holds a certain weightage, right? In India, I'm a doctor with an MBA. But Americans don't have the concept of MBBS. It's a concept that exists only in Commonwealth countries. And they only have the concept of an MD. And so every time we would be making our introductions, I would tell them that I'm a doctor, and they'd go, oh, so you're an MD. I'm like, no, I'm an MBBS. Wait, what's an MBBS? Well, it's Bachelors of Medicine and Bachelors of Surgery. Wait, they have a bachelor's in medicine now? I'm like, yeah. And you're allowed to treat actual living patients? I'm like, yes. I kid you not, my first month in America, I had an identity crisis. And suddenly all those voices of my uncles and aunties and my relatives, they came back. And haunting me day and night. So many nights I went to bed and so many mornings I woke up with that same question. What if, Samyak, what if even before your career has taken off, you've shot yourself? You were impulsive and you were stupid and you've made the biggest mistake of your life and there's no going back now. But I'd come so far, there was no going back now, so I persevered. Now, towards the end of our MBA, my team and I, we had to present in front of board of directors and C-suite executives of billion-dollar companies in the state of New York, and we were answering questions about business management, telling them the issues in their company based on the Excel analysis that my team and I had done the night before. Well, can you imagine the mental impact something like that would have on this small-town boy who came from a completely different educational background, standing amongst white folks, wearing a two-piece suit, and is answering questions about business management in his second language? Profound impact, right? Are there any fans of Keanu Reeves? Cool. I'm not that old then. Cool. Have you seen The Matrix, the first part? Remember how at the end of Matrix, Neo, who's the protagonist, is able to see the Matrix for what it really is? Linear codes of 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. That's exactly how I felt. I felt so liberated because all those 6 years in med school, I was busy studying what was happening inside the human body. But those 2 years in the States finally gave me a chance to learn how the world functions and what was happening outside the human body, and it was phenomenal. Right? Now, by the end of 2019, luckily, I had a fairly decent idea of what I wanted to do with my life, which was I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship in healthcare. And I knew that any strong company requires a solid talent pool. So what I did was I took a semester in HR management, which at the time was so bizarre to all of my friends because if you're aware, people usually do an MBA in either marketing or they'll do an MBA in finance or supply chain logistics or HR management. But what I did was because I knew I would need those hard skills in my entrepreneurial endeavors, I took classes in marketing, digital marketing, operations management in healthcare, financial management in healthcare, HR management, because I knew at some point I'll probably have to hire people, interview people, learn how payroll and compliance works, learn how employee incentivization works, and stuff like that. Now, graduating in America during 2020 COVID times as an immigrant student wasn't the best time. And fortunately or unfortunately, I got rejected from more than 100 jobs that I applied to. At the same time, I was also keeping an eye on the Indian healthcare landscape, and I realized that Ayurveda as a form of treatment was making a slow comeback. And so I thought to myself, what if somehow I could combine my parents' knowledge in Ayurveda and my knowledge in allopathy, modern medicine, and business management? If I could somehow do that, I could potentially have a successful business model. And so with a very heavy heart, I decided to move back to India, move in with my family. And once again, all of those voices of my friends came back. But this time around, they were along different lines, Samyak, if you wanted to go back, why would you come here in the first place? Samyak, how can you go back to India? It's so crowded. It's so polluted. Samyak, if you just wait for 5 more months, you can easily land a 6-figure job. It's not that easy, by the way. All right? All fair points in retrospect, all fair points in their judgment, but times mandated, circumstances mandated, and I spotted an opportunity. And so with a very heavy heart, I left America, I came back here. And today, I'm leading a team of 40 individuals. We're seeing almost 2,000 patients suffering from vitiligo per month, which I can proudly say is the highest number in the world. Any private institution or government institution, nobody's running those sort of numbers. I'm running an NGO that allows me to help said vitiligo patients suffering with free treatment and consultations and whatnot. But the point is, here's my lesson number 3 for you, which is spot opportunities and dare to say yes. One of my favorite entrepreneurs, Sir Richard Branson, says, if you're not sure about doing something, say yes, and then figure the rest of the stuff out later. For example, this TED Talk, when I was first presented with this opportunity, I think mid-March, I jumped on it. And then they asked me, well, do you know what you're going to talk about? I'm like, I have no idea. And they said, well, can you give us at least 2 speaking points in the next 4 days? I'm like, that I can do. So, and this is just an example. The main thing is with my career also, I spotted an opportunity and I took a leap of faith and I dared to say yes, and then I figured the rest of the stuff out later. So that's my final lesson for you. Now I'd like to tell you, 10 years ago, I was sitting right there. I was so sure that I wanted to become a dermatologist, not just any doctor. I wanted to become a dermatologist. And then 5 years ago, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And then 2 years ago, again, I had no idea whether I wanted to come back to India or stay there and keep applying for jobs and probably, land a decent 6-figure salary job or whatever. But in all those instances where I was faced with uncertainty and doubt, I had one thing with me, which was a belief that as long as I put in consistent and honest hard work, it doesn't matter what I end up doing, I'll probably be okay, right? So maybe your parents want you to become a doctor and you don't. Maybe your parents want you to become an engineer and you don't. It's fine, all right? Maybe you want to become a travel blogger or a lifestyle blogger, and surprisingly in today's day and age, those are all respectable and acceptable career choices. But there's a catch here. You still have to put in consistent, honest hard work, and you have to manage to convince your parents, because why not? They're funding your education, right? Okay, I'm not trying to discourage you from following conventional career choices. I'm not saying don't become a doctor or don't become an engineer. Those are all respectable choices. I'm telling you that if you're having doubt, if you're having second thoughts, if you're having conflicting ideas, it's okay. As long as you put in consistent, honest hard work, you'll end up being okay. I'm trying to encourage you to have difficult conversations with yourself. I'm trying to encourage you to have difficult conversations with your family, because maybe, just maybe, you'll end up on a TEDx stage one day. Thank you, guys.